Ancient oceans, a brutal battlefield where monsters endlessly hunted, fled, and transformed in a race for survival. They were creatures that seemed impossible to be real, yet once ruled the oceans. Prehistoric oceans, creatures that should not have existed. Helicoprion had gone hungry for days. It follows a current carrying the scent of blood. The trail leads it to an ancient reef, where a Carboniferous is feeding on its kill. It is a tempting opportunity, but also a dangerous one. Carboniferous is another large predator of the Permian seas. Helicoprion charges from below. Carboniferous immediately strikes back. The two ancient predators collide in a violent exchange of bites and attacks. In the end, Helicoprion realizes it has chosen the wrong opponent. It breaks off the fight. Carboniferous remains beside the carcass. Sometimes survival matters more than victory. Its body was long and streamlined. Its four limbs had evolved into powerful flippers. Meanwhile, a massive tail generated the thrust needed to propel its 15-meter-long body through the water. The diet of this giant had almost no limits. If its jaws could hold it, it would eat it, even other mosasaurs. That power came from a 1.5-meter-long skull equipped with flexible joints. This mechanism allowed it to widen its mouth, adjust its bite angle, and swallow prey larger than its own head. A feature known as cranial kinesis. The most terrifying feature lay deep within its mouth, a second set of teeth near the throat. They functioned like a ratcheting system, gripping prey tightly and pulling struggling victims straight into the stomach. But ruling the top of the food chain did not come with complete safety. Deep bite marks on fossilized skeletons are evidence of fierce territorial battles and even brutal cannibalism. Although it is often mistaken for a dinosaur, Mosasaurus was actually a giant marine lizard, closely related to modern monitor lizards and snakes. By this point, that distinction hardly mattered. It had mastered the seas. There was no rival. Half a billion years before Mosasaurus, another creature was doing much the same job, with far fewer resources. in a world where no one yet knew what a predator should look like. A mouth like a goose barnacle, giant arthropod grasping limbs, spider-like appendages combined with a swimming style reminiscent of a cuttlefish. Nothing about it looked familiar, and that strangeness was what made Anomalocaris successful. At a time when most life measured only a few centimeters long, Anomalocaris held an overwhelming advantage, a true nightmare of the Cambrian seas. Fortunately, this predator left behind clues to its ancient reign. For decades, paleontologists believed it specialized in hunting trilobites. Many trilobite fossils bear unexplained cracks, scars, and bite marks. Anomalocaris was the prime suspect. But there was a problem. Its body was much softer and more flexible than originally thought. Even its front-grasping appendages were relatively delicate. As a result, its true diet was probably made up of soft-bodied animals. Whatever its prey, its most advanced weapon was its eyes, and those eyes may have changed everything. Mounted on two long stalks, these enormous 2-centimeter eyes scanned the sea floor with remarkable precision. Built from more than 16,000 lenses in each eye, this was a visual system so advanced that few modern arthropods, except dragonflies, can match it. When a target entered its field of view, the spiny appendages at the front would snap shut like a living trap, pinning the victim in place and pulling it straight toward the waiting, disc-shaped mouth. Not every killer stalked from the upper waters. Some never left the sea floor. They hid and waited, and ambushed. Beneath the ocean floor, Otoya sheltered inside U-shaped burrows that it dug itself. These deep tunnels served as both a secure fortress and a deadly trap. Its weapon was a throat that could be turned inside out, covered with countless rings of sharp teeth. The moment prey passed by, it could shoot this proboscis outward, seize the victim, and drag it underground. Most Cambrian creatures had a fairly clear role. Anomalocaris hunted. Wiwaxia grazed on algae. Others sifted through sediment in search of scraps of food. Artia, however, was not very selective. If it was alive, it could eat it. If it was already dead, it could still eat it. That flexibility became a powerful weapon. More than 100 million years of relentless evolution had passed. By the Devonian period, around 380 million years ago, the oceans had officially entered the age of fishes. Life now filled every corner of the seas, creating seemingly limitless opportunities for survival. And few creatures took advantage of that golden age better than Dunkleosteus. For decades, it was imagined as a sea monster more than 10 meters long, the size of a bus. But modern evidence suggests that most adult individuals were only about 4 meters in length. Even so, that was still an enormous size for its time. Size alone was not enough to make Dunkleosteus legendary. Its ultimate weapon lay in its mouth, a place completely devoid of teeth. Instead, Its jaws were lined with razor-sharp, bony plates. Every time they opened and closed, the plates rubbed against one another, continually sharpening themselves over time, turning the jaws into a living cutting machine. In the Devonian seas, very few creatures could escape this predator. Even Cladozolac, the speed phantom of the Devonian, was no exception. The moment it detected danger, Cladozolac made a sharp turn, but Dunkleosteus was already too close. With its immense power, Dunkleosteus dominated the Devonian oceans for millions of years. It seemed like the perfect evolutionary path. Yet the prehistoric ocean was a laboratory without limits. And sometimes, those wild experiments produced something as bizarre as Helicoprion. Helicoprion possessed a weapon unlike anything that had come before it, or anything that would appear afterward. A spiral whorl of teeth coiled inside its mouth. Closely related to modern ghost sharks, but instead of shedding old teeth, Helicoprion retained every one of them. Each new tooth that grew pushed the older ones forward. The process continued throughout its life. The teeth locked together, curling inward to form an ever-expanding circular blade. When the jaws closed, this tooth whorl rotated backward, pulling prey deep into the throat. It remains one of the strangest feeding mechanisms ever discovered. And this predator was anything but small. Some individuals may have reached lengths of up to 10 meters, far larger than many modern sharks, large enough to rank among the top predators of the Permian, nearly 270 million years ago. Then came the end of the world. The end Permian mass extinction wiped out most life on Earth, turning the oceans into devastated wastelands. Over millions of years, the seas gradually recovered, creating an opportunity for reptiles to quietly expand their domain. For prey animals, the arrival of every new predator brought immense pressure. They were forced into a deadly evolutionary arms race, developing defensive systems unlike anything the oceans had seen before. Hallucigenia, a tiny worm-like creature of the Cambrian seas, less than the length of a human finger. Yet it carried a remarkably aggressive defense system. Running along its back were rows of sharp spines, like those of a porcupine, a clear warning to every predator. This meal would come at a cost. It did not need to run fast. It did not need to grow large. It survived by forcing predators to look elsewhere, protected by the fortress of spines on its back. Hundreds of millions of years after its extinction, Hallucigenia continued to puzzle scientists. In the first reconstruction, it was even assembled upside down. The spines were mistaken for legs, and the real legs were interpreted as strange tentacles. The name Hallucigenia was inspired by its appearance. A creature that seemed to have stepped out of a bizarre dream, or more accurately, a hallucination. Only after better preserved fossils were discovered did the picture begin to become clear. Hallucigenia was not a monster, not a predator, and certainly not a giant. Hallucigenia leaves behind a simple lesson. Evolution does not always favor the biggest creature. Sometimes, being harder to eat is enough to survive. And if a predator cannot be stopped from attacking, it is better to detect it before it is too late. A survival strategy taken to the extreme by Opabinia. While most animals possess 2 eyes, Opabinia took things to another level. 5 separate eyes, all mounted on top of its head. Why it needed so many eyes remains a mystery more than 500 million years later. But in an ocean filled with predators, being able to see in every direction was a vital advantage. Yet its strangest feature was undoubtedly its flexible proboscis. It could bend and curl in multiple directions, and it ended in a small pincer-like structure. Scientists believe Opabinia used this unusual tool to search for food along the seafloor. Small worms, organic debris, or tiny soft-bodied creatures hidden within the sediment. Armed with these unique adaptations, it thrived for millions of years, despite a body length of only about 7 centimeters. But the ocean was not conquered only by creatures born beneath its surface. Some arrived from the skies. And one lineage of birds would sacrifice flight itself to master the underwater world. Its wings, the product of 100 million years of evolution, had been reduced to vestigial bones, useless for flight. In the setting of the Western Interior Seaway 85 million years ago, that was a trade-off. What it gained in return was a body up to 1.5 meters long, perfectly redesigned below the waterline for a single purpose: diving to hunt. Dense bones reduced buoyancy, allowing it to sink more easily. Its legs were positioned far back on the body, creating an exceptionally powerful underwater propulsion system. But on land, those same legs left it nearly helpless. It had to crawl on its belly like modern diving birds, coming ashore only to nest and rest. Notably, its skull still retained small, backward-curved teeth that interlocked tightly. An evolutionary irony. The creature that abandoned its wings retained the very teeth its ancestors had discarded long ago. Because for a stealth assassin diving after slippery fish, teeth are far more useful than a beak. Above the same Western Interior Seaway, Ichthyornis ruled the skies. A compact body, long narrow wings, a large breastbone providing attachment points for powerful flight muscles. In many ways, it already bore a striking resemblance to modern terns and gulls. But when it opened its beak, the Jurassic seemed to look back. Its teeth were set in individual sockets, just like those of its theropod dinosaur ancestors. They functioned like a trap, helping it grip slippery fish during lightning-fast strikes. It is one of the clearest examples of mosaic evolution. The flight capabilities of the future, the teeth of the past. 2 opposing traits functioning perfectly within a single body. In 1872, the discovery of Ichthyornis fossils in Kansas shocked the scientific world. A seabird carrying a mouthful of dinosaur teeth. To Charles Darwin, it was among the most compelling pieces of evidence that evolution does not proceed through sudden leaps, but through countless transitional forms connected across time. More than a scientific specimen, Ichthyornis was the closest representative of the ancestors of modern birds. Long-distance flight, small body size, a flexible diet, all were golden tickets that helped its lineage pass through the bottleneck of survival. However, even Ichthyornis did not survive the asteroid impact. The intense selective pressures that followed the catastrophe favored forms equipped with horny beaks. From that point onward, every bird alive on Earth would be toothless. But on land, evolution was preparing an equally extraordinary experiment. In the oxygen-rich forests of the Carboniferous, arthropods grew to sizes the modern world has never seen. And high above those ancient swamps, one giant hunter ruled the skies. The symbol of power in the Carboniferous skies had a name: Meganeura. It had been patrolling the air for half an hour, patiently watching the world below. Its greatest hunting tool was its compound eyes, extremely sensitive to movement. An insect had just emerged from its hiding place. It had placed itself in danger. Meganeura's hunting skills immediately came into play. Its wings accelerated, its body plunged from above. Its spiny forelegs spread wide in midair, locking onto the prey like a pair of pincers. Within moments, its powerful jaws had pierced the prey's protective shell. Although it resembled a dragonfly, it actually belonged to the extinct group of ancient griffinflies. Its body was larger and more robust, but that also reduced its ability to maneuver during sharp turns. As a result, it was most effective in open environments. Riverbanks, vast swamps, or the open air above primitive forests. Its diet consisted mainly of other flying insects. It may also have preyed upon small animals living around the water. And in the skies, it had no true rival. However, its enormous size came at a steep energy cost. Every flight consumed a significant amount of oxygen. Some hypotheses suggest that it had to rest frequently between takeoffs to recover its muscles and replenish its oxygen supply. For 6 million years, Meganeura held its position as the largest flying creature on the planet, turning the Carboniferous skies into an untouchable domain. What allowed them to grow to such extraordinary sizes? First, let's look at the modern world. Fossil evidence suggests it could grow to more than 2.5 meters in length, nearly half a meter wide, and weigh up to around 100 kilograms. This was Arthropleura, the largest arthropod ever known to have lived on Earth. For more than a century, this creature remained a mystery. Most fossils discovered were nothing more than scattered molted exoskeletons. No head, no identity. That changed when a discovery in France provided an answer. 2 juvenile specimens were preserved in exceptional condition, and for the first time, the head of Arthropleura was revealed. It was low and fairly rounded. 2 long antennae extended forward. Its eyes protruded from the sides of the head, much like those of modern crabs. Beneath them was a small but powerful set of jaws, creating a strange blend of a millipede and a centipede. But don't let this intimidating appearance fool you. Arthropleura was probably not a bloodthirsty predator. New studies suggest it most likely fed on decaying leaves, rotting wood, and dead plant matter accumulated on the forest floor. In other words, it was the cow of the ancient arthropod world. With such a massive body, it required an enormous amount of fuel every day, and nature provided exactly that. The Carboniferous world had very little competition. Vertebrates were only beginning to experiment with life on land. Many species still depended on water. True reptiles had not yet appeared. The Carboniferous period was the golden age of arthropods, and Arthropleura was one of its greatest beneficiaries. A giant but harmless Arthropleura. That was one of the rare pieces of good fortune in the Carboniferous ecosystem. Because not every arthropod giant was so gentle. Hidden deep within the darkness of the swamp forests was Pulmonoscorpius, a true predator. It was not as massive as Arthropleura. Its body measured only about 70 centimeters in length. But for a scorpion, that was still an impressive size. Unlike the giant millipedes wandering in search of decaying vegetation, Pulmonoscorpius was most likely a master of ambush. Moving little, patient, and extremely dangerous at close range. It did not need perfect eyesight to locate its prey. Millions of sensory hairs on its legs turned it into a living seismic detector. Every tiny vibration in the ground was captured. It could be the signal of a meal, or a warning that danger was approaching. At the front of its body was a powerful pair of pincers used to seize and hold a target. At the rear was the characteristic curved tail carrying venom. With a single accurate strike, the hunt could be over almost instantly. Today, traces of this animal survive only in the ancient rock layers of Scotland. All of them point to one fact. Long before dinosaurs came to dominate the planet, Earth's first forests belonged to arthropod killers. In your opinion, what was the key factor that turned these bugs into monsters? The oxygen-rich atmosphere, the ecological opportunities, or their unique body design? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. For hundreds of millions of years, countless creatures swam through the ancient seas. They hunted, reproduced, evolved, and went extinct. Not just once, but at least 5 times in Earth's history. Many of them had soft bodies. They decomposed within days, were swept away by currents, or were consumed by scavengers before fossils ever had a chance to form. Many of them had soft bodies. They decomposed within days, were swept away by currents, or were consumed by scavengers before fossils ever had a chance to form. Behind every strange creature we know, there may once have been others even more bizarre and terrifying. And that is the greatest mystery of the prehistoric oceans. Not what we have found, but what has vanished from history forever. Looking back at the history of the oceans, evolution seems to have broken its own rules many times. Strange body plans, unbelievable hunting strategies, and creatures that seemed as though they could exist only in the imagination. And despite everything we have discovered, the sea has not finished telling its story. In your opinion, is there another creature that should never have existed in the ancient oceans? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've watched all the way to the end, thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of the prehistoric world.